You are welcome to another episode of HN What's Your Say? The #1 listening show where we discuss real issues with real people like you. We are still featuring R. Kelly, real name Robert Sylvester Kelly, also known as the R&B King. R. Kelly's New York appeal hearing should have taken place a lot earlier than the Chicago one, but because the government has been afraid of moving forward with it, they kept requesting that it be postponed to a later date multiple times, and because of this, it's going to take place right after the Chicago appeal. As we approach the D-Day, very many people are anxious to see what transpires from the main appeal hearing that will likely be the determinant for R. Kelly's destiny, which has for the past 5 years remained confusing after the Me Too movement, with the sponsorship of major stakeholders in the industry and the government did what they do best, and that is mudsling celebrities in an attempt to cause their downfall. R. Kelly, who became a victim of this movement and the media sensationalism, ended up with 2 guilty verdicts that were unfairly arrived at, and 2 subsequent long sentences that could see him locked up behind bars for the remaining part of his life. In the New York District of Brooklyn, R. Kelly was issued a harsh 30-year sentence that came with terms and conditions that even a serial killer the entire America knows well did not receive after taking multiple lives in vain. According to the Brooklyn federal judge Ann Donnelly, R. Kelly does not deserve to see the light of day ever again, and can only be due for supervised release after he has served the entire 30 years in maximum prison. It's to no surprise that many who have been observing the case and following the events closely do believe that Judge Ann Donnelly was carried away by her own emotions and individual prejudice against the R&B King when she issued such a harsh sentence to a man that killed nobody, and whose only crime was falling in love with the wrong women. Also important to remember is that almost none of the allegations and charges on the indictment was successfully proved by the evidence presented, and many of the guilty judgments on the various counts were derived from mere word-of-mouth testimonies told by the said victims whose position could not have allowed them to speak the truth. They wanted a result in their favor. They had already been told how much money they are likely to walk away with, and anyone in their position would not hesitate to stick to a script that would guarantee them hundreds of thousands of dollars if R. Kelly was labeled a predator. In Chicago too, R. Kelly was equally prejudiced and disadvantaged at trial, even if he was still able to win on more counts than he lost. Amazingly though, some of the government witnesses who were brought to the stand were eventually found to have lied about so many things with the aim of getting R. Kelly into a bad position, and definitely for financial gain, which was the main benefit for these women. This alone should have been the eye-opener to show the whole world, and the judges that are presiding over this matter, that in fact these accusers were not necessarily being truthful, only that some of the stories managed to pass without proper interrogation to prove they were full of lies. But even if some stories were not contested, a criminal court trial should not be basing judgment on stories told which can be easily concocted to win a case. Such proceedings of guesswork are only limited to civil cases where the accusers are not required to prove their case beyond reasonable doubt. When it comes to criminal cases, the plaintiff is required to provide sufficient evidence to the court enough to prove beyond reasonable doubt that the defendant is in fact guilty. Strangely though, during the Chicago appeal we still managed to hear of stories suggesting the Illinois federal judge did make certain important judgments by preponderance of evidence provided. How is this even acceptable by the Department of Justice, that the judge preponders evidence in a criminal court? A court where evidence is required to prove the case beyond reasonable doubt. We now know that Judge Harry Leinenweber did in fact assume R. Kelly is guilty for obstruction of justice, even if the jury acquitted him on these specific charges. This leaves onlookers wondering why we are still having conversations about such a matter that was closed off by the jury now inside the appeal court. Why would a trial judge even consider preponderance of evidence as an approach to solving a criminal case, going against the decision made by consensus of his jurors and opting to draw his own conclusion opposed to that made by the selected jury? It's interesting to see that back in New York, where the jurors were poorly selected resulting in a prejudicial team, the judge seemed satisfied with their shoddy work, and when it came to Chicago, where attorney Jennifer Bonjean made sure to critique the jury selection, the trial judge preferred to go against the jury's decisions. This has actually caused many to think the trial judges were in cahoots with R. Kelly's enemies to ensure he is locked up for the rest of his life. Why would they only have a problem with the jury's decision when it favors R. Kelly and not when R. Kelly is on the receiving end of things? Between the Chicago and New York appeals, The New York one is the most anticipated by those following this case, not only because it's the biggest determinant of what R. Kelly's fate from these cases is going to be, but also because the Brooklyn case was the most boggy with claims of RICO Act violation that simply don't add up, and Mann Act violations that were never successfully proven in court. Then the forced labor charges that were not proven beyond reasonable doubt. It is also important to remember that it is at this same trial that the woman who accused R. Kelly of kidnap was found to have lied on so many occasions. Kitty Jones, who was using code name Sonia like many others, did all in her capacity to frame R. Kelly as a kidnapper that allegedly locked her in the basement of his studio, but gladly no one bought her rather vague story. The already prejudicial jurors were more than willing to admit any claims that were made against R. Kelly, but fortunately or unfortunately for them, Kitty Yone's story was just too bogus and not concocted well enough to pass as false truth like many others. Supporters and fans of R. Kelly therefore cannot sit to see what transpires at the New York appeal, where some of the most serious allegations against R. Kelly, such as the RICO and Mann Act violation claims, are to be contested. Attorney Jennifer Bonjean has already done a great job in the Chicago appeal, where she contested the 20-year sentence that is way above the standard guidelines range, and the charges which were returned to court and tried way beyond their long-expired statutes of limitations. Her points were so relevant that the appeal judge began asking her to weigh her options if this was sent back to a retrial or resentencing. Ironically though, the appeal judge also expressed distrust in the trial judge, who she says may prejudicially decide to make things even worse for R. Kelly. According to Sierra, I have searched the case details and found no reason why R. Kelly should have gotten so much time. There is no doubt Asriel Clary has been lying on a lot of things. It becomes completely unfair to take a man's life away through such an indirect life sentence, yet it is clear that these women were actually lying about so many things. And when it comes to matters of Tasha K and the BOP, the moment this information became public knowledge, the entire case should have been thrown out. The court ought to realize that this man they are crucifying is a father with responsibilities, and that the allegations against him were only circumstantial. There is no concrete evidence against him, everything is simply hearsay. According to Ray Johnson, I was listening closely when the appeal judge was telling attorney Jennifer Bonjean that if R. Kelly was to return to the trial judge for resentencing, there is a chance he could issue a more serious sentence. Well, in my opinion, this would be so wrong on all levels. In fact, this shows that even the appeal judge knows well the trial judge would be interested in taking that wrong path to punish R. Kelly for appealing this case. The prejudice is predominant and well known. If you wish to take part in a live interview on this channel discussing any of these topics, let us know by emailing us on sashahnnewsroom@gmail.com for scheduling. That is all we had for you today on HN What's Your Say? To keep updated whenever we post a new video, subscribe to this channel now. Also remember to hit the bell icon and enable notifications. And feel free to share your opinions with us in the comment section below, and let us know if you would like us to publish your views in our next release. We value all our subscribers' opinions.